Hey guys, this is Delphine with the CultureQuirk channel. So for this video and the next one, I'll be going over a couple of tools that I use to learn Japanese, and these are actually the things that I had to use in school. This video was requested by And I Wish You Away, who wanted to know more about textbooks that I'm familiar with. So in my classes in college, we only used a couple of different textbooks, and here is the first one. Yookoso, An Invitation to Contemporary Japanese, 3rd edition by Yasuhiko Tosaku. The book starts from ground zero for beginners. And for my class, we used Yookoso for all of the lower division stuff, so that's 4 semesters, 2 whole years. Having said that, it's been a couple of years since I've used this book at all, so I don't remember everything about it, but I still have a pretty good idea as to what's good and bad about it. I do remember that I definitely did not like it at first, although it did grow on me. So to set this up, I had a bit of a base in Japanese that I just had through self-teaching before I went to college. So I was already familiar with some of the very basics, and then I remember when I was relearning that when I started this book, thinking, ooh, I don't know if I'm like the way they're teaching. But over time, I did get very used to it, and overall, I do think it's a decent textbook for beginners. I don't know if it's the best one out there, since this is the only beginner's textbook that I've ever used, but it's alright. So to go into more detail, the way this works is that they use mainly Romaji at first, and they teach you hiragana and katakana while they're teaching you some of the basic grammar and vocab. And to be honest, that's the way that I started learning Japanese as well. I initially just wanted to know how to speak a bit. I was just doing it for fun, and the writing system really intimidated me, so at the beginning, I wasn't really interested in learning how to read. And while I ended up okay, and those who would use this book I'm sure would end up fine too, from my perspective now, I would say don't do that. At the very least, just learn your hiragana before you learn anything else. It really isn't that hard. You'll get the hang of it in just a few days, and I just think that the sooner you stop using Romaji to learn everything and that you learn the Japanese alphabet, the better you'll be in the long run. However, I can see how this would be more difficult to implement in a classroom setting. I mean, even from the get-go, my teachers would speak to us in Japanese a lot, and so they don't want to spend the first day teaching us hiragana and katakana. They want to teach us things like hello, thank you, repeat after me, that kind of thing. So in a classroom setting, I think that method's okay, but if you're teaching yourself, please take my word for it and learn that hiragana, katakana from the beginning. I promise it's not that bad and that it's worth it. And if you want to know more about how to start learning the writing system, by the way, I'll put a link to another video that I've made. Something else that kind of turned me off in this book is the way that grammar is initially taught, although I think a lot of people would actually agree with the way that Yookoso handles it. You're basically given a lot of sentences and you're told what they mean, but they don't really dissect the sentence and explain every single part to you. I mean, they'll briefly tell you things like which word is the verb and ka is used in a question, but they don't really go into too much detail. For some people, this is a good thing. It's a natural way of learning by seeing a bunch of examples and sort of throwing yourself into it, and then you'll start getting the nuances and stuff over time. And I think that's great. The more examples, the better. But I like it when someone also explains to me very specifically what each part of the sentence means. And here, I'm especially thinking of particles. For example, I remember seeing the particle ni several times in this book, and every time it meant something different, and we learned how to use the expressions that had ni in them, but I don't remember ever seeing a section all about the particle ni, how to use it, when to use it, etc. I get that explaining all of the different uses for a particle at the beginning probably won't make much sense to a person and might be overwhelming, but I would personally rather have an explanation available for me to look at whenever I want to help me in understanding those example sentences. Even if it's just in the appendices, and I double-checked, I didn't see a single particle section at the end of this book. And that meant that I would sometimes have to end up searching the internet to look for an explanation, which I feel like that means that the book isn't doing its job. This mostly applies to just particles though, and it only really bothered me at the beginning of the book because later on you don't really need those explanations anymore. Honestly though, aside from those 2 complaints, I was fine with this textbook. I mean, it looks pretty nice and they do try to add in a few things to make it a bit more fun, like pictures. I like that each chapter is a theme and they actually give you some pretty useful vocabulary. They give you example dialogues, which are oftentimes a little dry or cheesy, but I still think it's better than having like a list of sentences or something, and I do feel like a lot of the examples could be used in real life. The way they pace the grammar stuff is pretty good too, and the one thing I liked in particular was how they taught conjugations for verbs, adjectives, even counters. This is where the appendices really pull through. I love these kinds of charts that show you all the different types of verbs and their conjugations, and they have lists for days of the week, how to tell time, counters, all that stuff is really nice to refer to. And the way that these types of concepts are taught within the book itself, as far as I can remember, are pretty good too. So there we have it, a look at Yookoso. Again, this textbook is okay. okay. If you're taking a class and are assigned this book, then don't worry about it, you can learn from it just fine. If you're studying on your own though and are looking for a good textbook for beginners, I think that there are probably some better ones out there. So that's one of the textbooks that I use for class, and in the next video we'll be going over one that's more for intermediate learners, and I have a bit of a different opinion on that one, so stay tuned. So thanks for watching, make sure to comment, rate, subscribe, and happy learning, guys!